Hey everybody, this video is designed to go along with your handout on microphones, so hopefully you have that in front of you. You'll notice that handout has 4 microphone types. We're not going to worry about USB microphones at this point, although they are certainly up and coming and definitely the wave of the future. But I just want to look at 3 microphone types for the purposes of this class: dynamic mics, condenser mics, and ribbon mics. So if you look on your handout, they're not in that order. It has dynamics first. Well, it has USB mics first. We'll skip them. But if you turn to page 2, there is a picture of a dynamic mic. Well, first of all, let's just get a definition. The book has a definition of a microphone on page 67. A microphone, as well as a speaker, is a transducer. What's a transducer mean? It means it converts one form of energy into another. So speakers convert electrical energy into acoustical energy, and microphones do the same thing backwards. They convert acoustical energy into electrical energy. So let's look at the 3 microphone types, and let's start with dynamics, which are the most simple. You can see there on your handout, it's a picture of a dynamic microphone. It's, again, like a speaker backwards. Here's one of the most popular dynamic mics on the planet, but behind this little grill here is a diaphragm you can't see, but it's just a very thin piece of, I think they use mylar in these, but it's a cone that responds to air pressure. So as air pressure hits this thing, it moves in accordance with the amplitude and the frequency, and turns it into electrical energy, which comes out at the other end here, where the cable goes. So dynamic mics are the most simple kind of mic to understand, because, like I said, it's a speaker backwards. Dynamic mics are passive, which means they don't require any external power to operate. You can just plug them in to any input with a mic cable, and they're good to go. We'll come back to that. I'm going to have a chart on that. But so there's the dynamic mic. This is the Shure. The picture is the Shure Sm58. This is little brother, the Shure Sm57, probably one of the most popular mics on the planet. About $100 retail. Everybody uses these on snare drums and on guitar amps. No matter how expensive a studio it is or how big of a tour it is, you'll probably see one of these on a snare drum. So there's the dynamic mic. Let's go back to page 1 and look at the condenser mic. Condenser mics use something called capacitance. They are a lot more involved. You're not going to be responsible to know how these things work. I really barely know how they work, so it's not that. The book gets into it on page 68 and 9. By the way, so this book uses all these weird terms. They call dynamic mics moving coil microphones on page 68. I actually have that scratched out. He says some call them dynamic mics. I've never heard them called moving coil microphones, so just scratch that out and do somebody else a favor. On the next page, it talks about, oh, there it is, yeah. He says, classifies dynamic mics. The term moving coil is, well, anyway, they're calling it a moving coil mic instead of a dynamic mic for some crazy reason. But forget that. By the way, it says here on the right here near the grill, dynamic. So it's telling you what kind of a microphone it is right there. It's got a few other clues too about the polar pattern, which we'll get to in a minute. All right, there's that. Let's talk about condenser mics. So condenser mics use and again, so they call them capacitor microphones. I can tell you I've never in my life heard someone call a microphone like this a capacitor microphone. Everyone calls them condenser microphones. Something else I've got scratched out, and I wrote never in the margins. Confusing. No book's perfect, but I think this guy's been teaching too long and not been out in reality. So condenser, like your handout says, dynamic, okay? So condensers, here's the big thing. Condensers are active microphones, which means they need power to operate from an external source. And we call that power phantom power. You'll see that there in the handout on that first page. You just read through that paragraph. It talks about the phantom power. So what happens is the power is actually supplied through the cable through one of the pins here where the audio actually comes out too. So condenser microphones need phantom power to operate, okay? That's the big distinction right here. Don't need it, have to have it. And we'll talk about what phantom power is later. All right, the third type is the ribbon microphone. That's the last one on your handout. And I actually have, they're showing you a picture of a Royer 121, which is what I have here in the studio. This one's got a big shock mount around it, but there it is. A ribbon microphone, well, it actually uses a thin ribbon of metal, and they're very sensitive. That's about all I know about them. I'm not a mic designer, but here's the big takeaway. Ribbon microphones, unlike condensers that have to have phantom power to operate, a ribbon microphone not only doesn't need phantom power, but should not have phantom power applied to it. You can damage a ribbon microphone severely if you happen to plug a mic cable in and phantom power is already turned on and sends voltage to this mic. You might wind up having to send it back and get it fixed. So doesn't need phantom power, but doesn't care if it's on. It just doesn't matter. Got to have it and must not have it. Okay, in almost all cases. I think there's some weird new ribbon now but for the most part, ribbon microphones don't need phantom power. Okay, so there's the three big microphone types: ribbon, condenser, and dynamic. Now let's talk about another distinction between microphones, and that's the polar pattern, also called the pickup pattern. There's some diagrams in your book on page 72 through page 74. This handout has some, unfortunately, they're not great. Actually, they look better on the screen than they do on the paper. But anyway, we want to look at, really, again, for the purposes of this class, this handout shows you 5 different polar patterns. You want to understand cardioid, which is the first one there. Don't worry about supercardioid and hypercardioid, so skip those two. And then omnidirectional, and then figure 8. So maybe these diagrams aren't as bad as but if you have the book, they're definitely a little better here, a little more clear. So in the book, here's the 3 I have kind of circled that we want to just concentrate on, that you're responsible for knowing. All right, so the first one is, let's talk about omnidirectional first. So in omnidirectional, if you look here at the top, it says 0 degrees, and there's a microphone sort of facing the top. In other words, that's the front of the mic. And that whole circle, 180 degrees there, is the back, and then there's the 2 sides. So an omnidirectional microphone picks up equally from all sides. That's why if you look at the handout, these rings, these concentric rings here in your handout represent amplitude. The farther out the ring is, the higher the decibel level the mic's picking up. So you can see here with this omnidirectional pickup pattern, no matter what direction you are around the microphone, it picks up equally. So omni, many, directional. So omnidirectional means it picks up in all directions equally. Let's switch to cardioid, which is, cardioid is, instead of being omnidirectional, it's very unidirectional. So this cardioid pickup pattern here, this is the front of the mic, 0 degrees. And remember I told you these rings represent amplitude. So you can see as you come around to the back, the rings go way in. This is decrease in volume. And it's sort of a heart shape, you know. That's why it's called cardioid. Maybe I'll hold it that way. So this will be the front, 0 degrees. And you see as you come around to the back, the output drops off quite a bit. And even to the sides, it starts to decrease quite a bit. So the mic picks up great this way, not so much as you come around. And by the time you get to the back, it's severely decreased. So cardioid, also known as unidirectional, okay? Which the handout, I think, tells you that. And then the last one is the figure 8 pattern, or bidirectional. So in this picture, the front is here. I'll put it at the top. That way it's more of an 8. So this is 0 degrees at the front of the microphone. So if you're at the front, it picks up great. Remember, this is the farther out these rings are, the more volume it's picking up in decibels. So at the front, it picks up great. At the rear, it also picks up great, equally well in 2 directions, 0 degrees or 180 degrees from the back. And then, but as you come to the sides at 90 degrees and over here at 270, whichever one's which, it almost nulls out. It picks up terribly. So this ribbon microphone that I was showing you before is bidirectional. It has a figure 8 pickup pattern. This is the front right here. And so if I turn it sideways, it's picking up great from the front, picks up great around back, but it doesn't pick up right here from the side. I'll have the front facing you. All right, so it picks up great this way, picks up great around back, equally well. But if I were to come and talk into it from the side, you wouldn't get anything. So you can use that to your advantage when you know how the mic's picking up, to reject things you don't want to pick up and focus on things you do want to pick up. All right, we got 3 pickup patterns, right? Unidirectional, also known as cardioid, right there. Omnidirectional, picks up in all directions equally. And bidirectional, or figure 8, picks up front and back, rejects from the sides. All right. Hey, one more thing. Now that you know how to read a microphone polar pattern chart and see things like cardioid and omni, a lot of microphones tell you things about themselves on the body of the mic. Remember I told you the Shure Sm57 tells you, hey, I'm a dynamic mic. It also has a little symbol right here that you might notice is the cardioid pickup pattern symbol. So it's telling you, hey, I'm a cardioid pickup pattern microphone. That means I'm kind of unidirectional. I really pick up this way, and stuff that's, you know, behind me, I'm not going to pick up too well, which is good to know, because sometimes you're trying to pick up one thing and also ignore other things. So you can point the back of it at things you don't want to pick up. But some mics, like this little condenser I showed you before, now we'll zoom in on this. It's got a few other features. One of them is this mic has a variable pickup pattern. So you'll notice right now it's got the cardioid sign, but this little wheel spins and actually changes. There's the figure 8 pickup pattern. So this mic can go from figure 8, where it'll pick up this way in the front and also behind, but reject from the sides, in an 8 pattern, or you can switch it to cardioid. Actually does hypercardioid and supercardioid too, but we're not going to worry about that. And then finally it does, there's that circle, omnidirectional. So you can switch this mic from omni to cardioid to figure 8 It's a variable pickup pattern, which is pretty handy. It's also got a little high pass filter we're going to talk about, but I just want you to notice that. Remember, frequency is horizontal. It's not a really good diagram, but it's telling you that you can roll off the low end a little bit. We'll talk more about that when we get into EQ. But anyway, pretty cool, pretty versatile mic. Okay, thirdly, so we've talked about the three main microphone types: condenser, dynamic, ribbon. We've talked about microphone polar patterns: unidirectional or cardioid, omnidirectional, and bidirectional or figure eight. And then now let's talk about microphone frequency response. Okay, here is a picture in your handout on the right before the polar pattern. This is the third page. The second page starts at the bottom with how to read a microphone frequency chart. Let's read some of this together. Can tell you a lot about what situations are appropriate for a given microphone, et cetera, et cetera. Let's go to the second paragraph. So how do you read it? The horizontal numbers in a microphone frequency chart represent frequencies, again, usually over the 20 hertz to 20 kilohertz range. Remember how I told you, think about frequencies this way horizontally and amplitude this way? That's going to just always pay off. So, and the vertical numbers represent relative responses in dB, decibels. So as you look at the frequency chart, you can tell how a given microphone performs at a certain frequency. How is this information helpful? Well, let's look at the famous Shure Sm57 frequency chart. So when you look here, you'll notice this is 20 hertz way down here and 20 kilohertz down here, and they've just given you a few markers: 50, 100, they denote 1,000, they denote 10,000. You'll notice there's a line here that would correspond to 2,000, 3,000, 4,000, 5,000, etc. And this would be 100, 200, 300, 400, up to 1. So they delineate through the hundreds and through the thousands, and then you got 10,000. That line would be 15K. That's not marked right there. Anyway, and then you've got amplitude. So in the middle here, you've got 0. This would be, it shows you up to a plus or minus 20 dB decibel range at any frequency. And a microphone that reproduces all frequencies evenly would be described as a flat microphone. And this is why, because it would be, the frequency response would show a straight line from 20 hertz all the way up to 20,000. It would just be even horizontally. It would be completely flat, like a straight line. So that's where we get the term flat frequency response, meaning there's no peaks or dips. This particular microphone, if you look at it, where does it start dipping? Take a look there. Remember, this is 100, so this is 200. So starting at about 200 hertz, it starts to fall away. It's down 5 decibels, 5 dB at 100 hertz. When you get down to 50, it's down 10 dB. So it's starting to, it doesn't get that low end real great. And then it's pretty flat until it gets up to, this is about, looks like at about 2,000, it starts to lift and go up. It peaks out at about plus 5 or 6 dB around 5,000 cycles. If you count these, again, you're counting frequencies this way and then decibels this way. So it has a little peak around 5K. Then it kind of gets back down to flat around 15K. And then the last 5,000 cycles that we can hear, it starts to drop down pretty severely. So let's read what it says next to here. What does that tell you? Well, remember I told you that's such a iconic mic on snare drums? The frequency response of the SM57 makes it especially good for certain instruments, such as a snare drum, because the fundamental frequency of the snare resides in that 150 to 250 range, right where the SM57 response is flat or neutral. In other words, at this frequency, what you hear going into the mic is what you tend to hear coming out, nothing more, nothing less. The presence bump to the right, that little bump, is what is where the snap of the snare resides. So that's correct. Up there around 2K, 3K, 4K, 5K, that's where the snare has a lot of snap to it. So, and then the rolled off low end makes it great for de-accentuating the kick drum, the bass drum, which is often very close in proximity. So you got a bass drum that's really pounding away down there at 100 hertz, 50 hertz. well, it's not picking that up so great. So that's great. You're trying to focus on the snare drum. And then it's got this little thing. So anyway, microphones being flat isn't always desirable. And it says here, this combination is what most engineers are looking for in a great snare mic. The ability to capture the true sound of the snare, accentuate its snap, and reject other instruments in close proximity. So there's a frequency chart. We'll be looking at them more. But again, remember, frequencies this way, amplitude this way. When you look at a microphone, you can look at this and already kind of know some things about the mic. Whether it's shy in the bass range or whether another mic might show a boost and it picks up a lot of bass, and so you would use them for different applications. All right, we've done 3 microphone types, 3 polar pickup patterns, and we just talked about frequency response charts, which are on page 72 in your book. Let's talk about a couple more things. Proximity effect. So here in the book on 77 and 78 is proximity effect. You might think proximity effect has something to do with how close you are to a mic, and it does. What it means is, I'll read it from the book, when any microphone is placed close to a sound source, bass frequencies increase in level relative to the mid-range and highs. That response is known as proximity effect, or bass tip-up. Again, never heard of that. So proximity effect just means and here's a frequency response chart showing proximity effect on a mic, where as you get closer to the mic, so the top line is if you're a 1/4 inch away from the microphone, and the bottom line is this one is 2 inches away, this one's 3 inches away. But basically, all it means is, and I've got a Pro Tools demo on that I can show you. The closer you get to a microphone, the more the bass increases. It doesn't just get louder, but it gets more bassy as well. By the way, I got an EQ on this mic. I don't really sound this good. Check out this. This is this microphone without an EQ. I just flattened it. So that's me with my honky mid-range and no real low end and no real crisp highs. Pretty sad, but putting the right EQ on something can really make it sound more hi-fi, huh? Okay, a couple more things. Plosives. Plosives on page 96. Plosives. The popping plosives of consonants like P and B. So basically it's a huge burst of low end, usually distorted, overblown across a microphone's diaphragm, and it usually is the result of the letter P, somebody popping their P. When you say the word P, you can feel that on your hand. If you, there's a burst of air, and a microphone will often, I'm not listening to this, but I'm probably popping. I've got a plosive demo too in Pro Tools, so we'll go over that. But the solution to plosives is a windscreen. I don't have one here, but I got a great Pro Tools demo. Let me get my windscreen. So with plosives being a problem in audio, the solution is a good windscreen or pop filter. You could use those two terms interchangeably, but basically this is just a sonically transparent mesh of fabric stretched across one of these little hobby rings, and I'll bring some to class. It's amazing if you put it between your hand and your mouth and blow, you'll see how it pretty much gets rid of all the P's. So if I put it here now, hopefully if I'm popping any P's, this is stopping it. Whereas here, if pop, 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 pop. Plosives problem, solution, windscreen, AKA pop filter. And I've got a bunch. I'll bring some to class. Almost forgot. Last thing, this is not in the book, but it's very important. So let's recap again. We've talked about 3 types of microphones: dynamics, condensers, ribbons. We've talked about pickup patterns: unidirectional, which is cardioid; bidirectional, which is figure 8; omnidirectional. We talked about their frequency response, and we talked about proximity effect, plosives. But let's also talk about microphones can be either front address or side address. What do I mean by that? A front address microphone means that you speak into what is obviously the front of it. So in this case, this microphone has a grill cloth, and the front, this is really the definition of a front address mic. The front is 180 degrees from the rear. So here's where the microphone cable goes, and here's where the front of the mic is. So a front address microphone, the capsule, the diaphragm that you speak into, is 180 degrees from the rear, from the output jack. All right, but a side address microphone, like this condenser here, here's the rear. The front is not here. You don't speak into it like this. The front is actually right here. So the front is 90 degrees. 90 degrees. Here's the front. Here's the rear. 90 degrees from the output jack. That's called a side address microphone. So you speak into the side of it, not the end of it, not from the other end of the output jack. So that would be a side address mic. So if I were, let's say I was miking a piano, right, with this mic, with this dynamic mic that's front address, I'd point, and let's say I'm playing a piano right here and the strings are in front of me and the lid's up. This would be pointing into the piano, something like this. But this microphone, this side address mic, would not be pointing like this. It would be pointing like this, because this is the front, which makes it handy. Side address microphones can get into tight spaces where you couldn't get a front address mic because you don't have anything here popping up in your way. This ribbon mic is also a side address microphone. The front is right here where it says Royer. This is the front of the mic. And so again, here's the rear. So the front is not 180 degrees from the rear. You notice there's nothing here but a solid piece of metal. That's good for not getting confused, right? So this is, again, the front is 90 degrees from the output jack, which makes it a side address mic. So if you were miking a piano with this mic, you'd put it in like this. Side address mics can get into tight spots, again, that because you don't have to worry about anything pointing up out of the way. Here's one more. This is a dynamic mic. So it's like the 57. It doesn't need phantom power. It's a pretty simple microphone. But where the 57 is a front address mic, this is a Sennheiser 609, is a side address mic. So again, let's just say we were miking a piano. This mic would be pointing down like this. Here's the front of this mic. It's even marked, by the way, front. There's the back. If I were talking into it, it would be very easy for you to hear where the front is. Anyway, so there's the front, 90 degrees from the output. So you would mic another mic that could get into tight spaces on a piano, on a drum set, on a guitar amplifier where you want to just get it right up against the grill and not have it taking up a lot of space. Pretty cool. There you go.